You're listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Pugh, a San Diego-based 500-hour yoga teacher that specializes in Vinyasa and Tantra yoga. In this podcast, I'll be speaking with inspiring individuals to reveal their stories and secrets to living a healthy and balanced life. Subscribe to wherever you get your podcast for weekly episodes on topics ranging from yoga to meditation, spirituality, mindful living, and more. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste. In this week's episode, you'll hear from San Diego-based yoga teacher Jenna Zabrosky. Jenna is known for her smartly sequenced Vinyasa, Hatha, and restorative yoga classes throughout San Diego and in her international yoga retreats. She has a few coming up, so stay tuned to hear more about them. In this episode, Jenna shares how she went from a competitive springboard diver to a handstanding yogi and eventually becoming a teacher. She shares her secret sauce to sticking with the meditation practice and a little more about what she's sharing with current teachers to tune up their teaching. I hope you'll enjoy this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to future episodes wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to leave us a review while you're there. And if you find yourself craving a vacation after hearing all about yoga retreats in our conversation, you can use code VINTANTRA100 to get $100 off an upcoming yoga retreat with Jenna. That's right, $100 off. All you have to do is go to yoga-with-jenna.com and use code VINTANTRA100 at checkout. Thank you. So let's take a travel back to when you first started practicing yoga, and when you came to the practice, what was your why at the time?
So I started practicing yoga almost 20 years ago. My mom brought me to my first yoga class in 1999. I'm like dating myself for how old I am right now. I had just finished high school. And I think I was in my first year of college and home for a winter break, or I might have been home for like a spring break, or can't quite remember. But she brought me to her yoga studio with her first teacher named Sylvia. And I'm actually still connected with Sylvia on Facebook, which is kind of neat to have my teacher from 20 years ago still be, somewhat in my life, where I get to follow her journey.
Yeah.
I came to the practice in a very physical way, very superficial way. I was always in some sort of sport or physical practice. I was a springboard diver in high school. And so I was really drawn to the physical practice of yoga and being able to like contort my body in all these shapes. And I loved handstands. Like right off the bat, I wanted to do every single arm balance and handstand and inversion. And I'd say for my first few years, it was really all about that. Like I didn't understand that there was this whole other realm of what yoga was. Even though I'm sure my teachers were teaching us that, I just didn't connect to that.
Yep.
Really until I was out here and practicing more seriously in San Diego, that I kind of discovered that there's this whole other realm to yoga. And it's been such a powerful, it has had such a powerful impact on my life. And just really honored to be able to share this with people now. It's come full circle, I feel like.
Yeah, and when you find that for yourself, it makes it so easy to teach it.
Totally.
So what would you, when someone is first starting, and I think it could be a big practice, like you said, maybe it's a physical part, whatever brings them to it. Is there anything you wish someone had kind of told you before you started down the path now, from where you are now?
I think the beauty of this practice is that you can come to it from so many different angles. I'm involved with a lot of teacher trainings, or I have been involved in teaching several teacher trainings, and I hear people come from all different walks of life. Some people have like a really solid meditation practice. They're like, I've been meditating since I was a little kid. And then some people are like, I had no idea that there was this other realm of yoga, of like philosophy and the ethics practice. I think it doesn't really matter how you get to yoga. It's just when you do, it's right for you in the way that it's presented to you. I think that it was whether you're coming from a spiritual practice, from a physical practice, you're going to get the spiritual aspect without even really understanding it first. You get to this point where you're like, wow, I just feel really clear. I feel happier. I'm less reactive. I'm calm. I guess maybe having somebody tell me more about the philosophy earlier on would have been nice, but I think it came at the right time for me. I just think like it all unfolded in a way that it was supposed to. So I don't know. Being open. And I think sometimes when you first start practicing, some ugly stuff can come up because you're forced to sit there and really kind of look at your crap. That deep mental stuff that gets brought to the surface, and a lot of people run away from it. And they're like, whoa, I didn't like the way I felt with that. I don't want to come back to it. So sticking it out and, giving it at least a few months and really seeing how this practice can be so powerful in so many ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to get through the dark stuff that you might not want to look at. And I remember practicing with Sean Korn, and I did a workshop with her, and she had commented, some of the lightest people I know are also some of the darkest people I know, because you're open to looking at that shadow and facing it, and without shame and without that, and then finding the lights and getting through that. So
yeah, and dark stuff's always going to come up. Like, I've been practicing for almost 20 years, and it's like, of course you are still going to have stuff come up. That's being human. But not running away from it and being able to really like face the stuff, like face the shadow parts of yourself and learn how to grow from that. Always be working at bettering yourself and being honest about it, that it's not all like rainbows and butterflies. Like, I'm a yoga teacher. I'm smiling all the time. I seem like I'm happy all the time. And for the most part I am, but there's also days where I'm like, totally down in the dumps and I can't get out of my own head. And, just knowing that it's just the full spectrum of being human and being able to kind of ride the wave and with a little more equanimity where you're not as like extreme from one to the other. Like that's what this practice teaches us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's practice. It's not perfect. You don't get to that point and I'm never going to go back down. I'm never going to have a wave of emotions. I'm never going to, life, we deal with things. That's finding the balance in between. Like, we're going to come up and it's natural. We should have emotions come up. We should be angry sometimes. We should be upset sometimes. We should be sad sometimes.
Yeah.
And this practice gives us so many tools to get back there. So cool. So why don't you tell us a little more about finding your way to becoming a yoga teacher? So you were a student first, really physical. You had come from an athletic background. When did you decide to become a teacher?
So I, in my past life, was a elementary school teacher for 8 years. And I do attribute a lot of my teaching skills to being an elementary school teacher, being comfortable standing in front of a room full of 30, it was kids at the time, but 30 people, 30 little humans, commanding their attention and really being able to differentiate for like who's in the room at the time. I think that I still find that to be one of my strong suits as a yoga teacher is being able to be like, okay, I've got all these different humans in the room. How can I really be in tune with what each person in here needs as best as you can? Right? It's kind of hard when there's like 35 people in the room, but you know. I had a really stressful job. The last 4 years of teaching, I was constantly in stress mode. I feel like I was really needing that outlet of practicing yoga. So my yoga practice became really strong, I'd say, while I was a school teacher. Like, it was the first thing I wanted to do when I got off of school. I would go to the yoga studio every day at 5:30. It was like my time to practice. It was my sanctuary, my outlet. And I knew I just wrote an article about this, but like probably 8 years before before I took my teacher training, I knew I wanted to do that. But it was also really scary, and it cost a lot of money to do a teacher training. And so I think I always just had an excuse of like, oh, I can't afford it, or I don't have the time to do it. So it took me a while, and I was working behind the front desk at La Jolla Yoga Center, which is eventually where I did my training at, and really got to know the teachers there. I had some really amazing mentor teachers that I was able to practice with, and I finally was able to kind of work out a deal with them. I was doing work trade at the front desk, so they really helped me to kind of be able to afford the teacher training and be able to do it in my own way, and literally started teaching the very next week after my teacher training ended. Like, teacher training ended, they gave me a class at La Jolla Yoga Center, which I was so grateful for, just because there's, at that time it was not an easy studio to get into. So I felt like they really wanted to take me under their wing and help me to grow. I also, at the time, Helen Klutz, she used to be a teacher here in San Diego. She was starting a paddleboard yoga class, or they were like starting a program on the bay, and she knew that I was working at a company called Everyday California at the time. I had quit teaching elementary school. I was a kayak tour guide for the summer because I was like, I need to do something so different and so fun. Yeah. So I was making like $10 an hour as a kayak tour guide at Everyday California. I was a snorkel guide. I was a whale watching tour guide. It was hilarious. Like, I was, awesome. I was like, I want to do something so fun. I was so tan. I worked with these fun people.
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
Yes. I love that.
I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place, but the moral of the story is, I got my teaching jobs, but I was teaching like, let me back up. So because I was working at Everyday California, Helen thought that I would be a good fit for the paddleboard yoga. And so she said, I want to get you on the schedule at Spirit Yoga so that you can get really comfortable teaching, so that when you get out on the paddleboards, it's like second nature for you. Well, I never ended up teaching paddle yoga, and I ended up becoming part of the Spirit Yoga community.
Yeah, nice.
While I was still doing kayaking and while I was nannying. So I worked these 3 jobs at the beginning of teaching. And eventually I just like slowly built up my teaching schedule, picked up basically every class I could at the time. Anybody that would give me a class I took. And then finally was able to, stop working at Everyday California. I stopped being a nanny, and then I just took on I went full-time pretty quickly as a yoga teacher. I'd say within probably just about a year, which is kind of rare. Most people don't do that. They do it as like a side job for years and years and years. And then I was like, I'm going head first. I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think it's possible to do it that way. I think, a lot of people think I can't be a full-time yoga teacher or that that's the only way. Like, they have to be only full-time and they can't have another job or something. So I think taking a little bit of the pressure off and being okay, having maybe a second job or a third job, or, transitioning out or starting it on the side, trying to get that first class or something, just getting a class or doing a donation-based class or something just to start teaching. And mentorships. I think mentorships are a huge thing. If you can find either a place in the community where you spend a lot of time and you enjoy spending your time, or someone in the community that you appreciate. And, I think we've all been there. So getting advice and a little guidance never hurts.
And I think a lot of new teachers are afraid to ask for help, and they're afraid to go to experienced teachers and just ask for advice, or ask to observe their class or get some feedback. I think it's nerve-wracking to have somebody come in and take your class when you're a new teacher, especially like one of your favorite teachers. Like, I remember the owners of Booty taking my class, and I'd be like terrified every single time. And I'm like, I'm the worst teacher in the world, But they really were there as support, and they wanted to give me honest feedback, and that probably was some of the most powerful feedback I could have gotten, because it made me stronger as a teacher, even though it's like, you don't want to hear criticism about yourself, and you don't want to, it's like, nobody wants to hear that, but it's so important. And I've never really been afraid to reach out to people and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Especially when it came to starting my like private client business, I'd be like, how much should I charge for that? Or, reaching out to people that are already doing it, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, that have already learned the lessons the hard way, So, I've been really, really lucky to have some awesome mentor teachers. Like, and now that I see the impact that they've had on me, I want to pay it forward. And that's something that I do kind of naturally. Like, I find myself gravitating towards helping new teachers, and I kind of like love that aspect of mentorship. So that's kind of the direction I'm going now too, is going more into a mentor role as far as on top of my teaching,
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a little more about that. So you recently introduced this last year, you introduced a workshop, Tune Up Your Teaching. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. What kind of things do you include in that? What do you find that, okay, once someone's been out there teaching for a little while, they kind of do need to tune up?
Yeah, so naturally, I think newer teachers have kind of been drawn to me as well. And they ask me questions all the time about, what's a better transition for this? Or how do I get private yoga clients? Or what do I do when I want to start a retreat? Like all these questions came to me. And then I just, I thought it'd be really cool to take all of these things that new teachers struggle with and put it together in a program. So my business partner, Nina Petruzzo, and I developed Tune Up Your Teaching, and it encompasses functional anatomy. It encompasses creative sequencing in an intelligent way. So really thinking about putting the functional anatomy into practice and making it feel really smooth and fluid within the body. Oftentimes, teacher trainings can be inconsistent. Like if you go from one studio to the next, you're not necessarily getting the same thing out of a 200-hour teacher training. And so there's all these little gaps that are missing. Some trainings are really heavily focused on learning one sequence. Some trainings are focused on you build your sequence from start to finish. Some trainings are focused solely on spirituality and you don't really understand how to sequence a class.
Yeah.
And there's benefit to all of those. So what we did is we've kind of found these holes and created a bridge between a 200-hour program and a 300-hour or your 500-hour. So if somebody doesn't want to go shell out like thousands of dollars to do their 300-hour, or if you've only been teaching like 2 years, you don't necessarily have to go get a 500-hour. I mean, you can, and obviously you're going to learn a ton from that, but it is expensive. It is a time commitment. So we developed a 3-day program. It's a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And it gives you practical applications and experience within sequencing, cueing, transitions, the business of yoga, and adjusting. Kind of all those things that I hear questions about all the time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's definitely a need in the industry. I think that's a great point because we come from these, there's so many styles. There's so many ways to teach those styles. There's so many variations. My 300 hours is very theoretical. It didn't have much of the history. I was glad that I had that from my 200, but it was like, if I had only been introduced to this,
right?
I don't know. I didn't learn a lot about alignment. I didn't learn a lot about the sequencing. I know that was, so I think having something to bring everyone to that similar playing level, that's great.
Yeah. And my teacher training was very focused on sequencing. So I understood from the start why you would sequence a certain way and, what really feels good in the body, like what needs to be opened up before you can go onto a deeper posture and like how can you warm up the body in like a really intelligent way. Like, so that's something that I do feel like I got a deep deep experience in from the start. And so that's something that I like to share with, my trainees. Also cueing like can make or break a class. I feel like the pace of the class, the timing, the breathing, transitioning. Oftentimes we, overlook certain transitions can really make or break the class as well. I'm a vinyasa teacher, so it makes a lot of sense in a vinyasa class to be able to seamlessly integrate your cues into the flow. It is a challenge to be able to get it all right.
And obviously your physical practice is amazing as well. And I know I've taken many classes with you where I'm getting into positions where I was like, oh, okay, I'm here now. Awesome. And and that sequencing, the way you do it to, really warm people up and prepare them for that. I'd like to talk about that a little bit more. So I'd say from an alignment perspective and a smart sequencing, are there common mistakes that you see out there that you've been kind of correcting in this Tune Up Your Teaching where you're like, I'd love you guys to really focus and think about this. As a newer teacher that might just be kind of overseeing something or transitioning people in a way that might be hurting them, and or over time it's not going to be good for their bodies. What kind of things would you sort of say as a baseline from an alignment sequencing perspective?
Yeah, so alignment's kind of a funny thing, because originally when these postures were developed, they were developed in India with 12-year-old boys in mind. A 12-year-old boy's body is extremely different than what my body looks like, and it's extremely different than what most people's bodies look like, And so although the postures were developed with a lot of thought behind them, it doesn't necessarily take into account like what we know about biomechanics and functional anatomy today. And so Nina and I both agree that there's kind of a spectrum within these postures of what the posture should look like within your body. So there's not a one size fits all for each student. So really empowering your students to kind of look at the posture within their own physicality and within their own limitations and strengths. Some people are like super flexible or hypermobile, so they go like really deep into it and they need a little bit more of that like effort or return or strengthening part of the practice. And then some people are, really stiff and rigid, and they might need a little bit more of like the fluidity and being able to get into it. So as a teacher, I've learned how to kind of give more of a parameter versus like, this is the way to do it. It's like, okay, so maybe in a lunge, you might ask them to, see what it feels like to really sink into your hips. And then see what it feels like to press into the front foot and back off. And maybe, try to take your tailbone down just a bit and see if there's a in-between that you can find that works best for your hips and your pelvis. So more of an exploratory practice versus this is the alignment. And I think one of the biggest cues that I have heard in the past is the example of when your arms are above your head. And you might have heard this, I'm sure, like, draw your shoulder blades down your back or pull your shoulders down the back. And it's from a functional standpoint. If we're going to reach for something up high on a shelf, I'm like doing this right now. You can't see me, but I'm reaching right now. But if you're going to reach for something on a shelf, or, back in the day, our ancestors, if they're going to go reach for an apple up in the tree, they're not going to like, no, wait, let me pull my shoulder blade down the back. Like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it came from, there was logic in the cue at one point. Yeah. But it doesn't really make sense, right? You want to let your shoulder blade lift and spread. And those kinds of cues can actually cause injury for a student if they're constantly pulling their shoulder blade down the back. Like, I've actually, heard students be like, wow, that's so freeing when you tell me I can actually lift my shoulder blade up, and I'm trying to pull it down my back this whole time. It's like, and my shoulders always hurt. But empowering students to be like, hey, really think about what your teacher's telling you, and you don't have to listen to everything that they say. Listen to what makes sense in your body, and if it doesn't make sense, then don't do it. So one of the things that we make sure that we cover in the training is really being your own, like, really be inquisitive and think about, like, why am I saying what I'm saying? What's the purpose of it? And or sometimes my cues being overgeneralized. The tuck the tailbone thing too, it comes from, like, if you're constantly telling students to tuck their tailbone under, it's actually going to put them into a position that's like overcompensating. But teaching them how to understand their pelvis in a way that's going to be, try this, try over tucking your tailbone, see what that feels like. Try sticking your butt out, see what that feels like. Can you find a middle of the road where your pelvis feels like it's more in a neutral position? Exploratory practice, I think, is where I've gone now nowadays versus like a strict alignment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting with the tailbone. I practiced with Desiree Rumbaugh, who's a teacher here in North County. She was at a Yoga Journal Live conference, and one of her biggest cues in class was not to tuck the tailbone so much.
Because some people naturally, press their hips forward, and some people naturally stick their butt out. So to give a general cue like tuck your tailbone under might not be right for like 90% of the class, but maybe one person needs it. So empowering your students to understand their bodies better, but also I'm trying to empower teachers to understand that not everybody's body in the class is going to be the same. So thinking of, maybe there are some general guidelines that are, pretty universal that you can say, but there's also like, you've got to be careful about not giving these like overgeneral cues.
Yeah. Awesome.
Or sometimes I'll start off the cue by saying, like, if you notice that your low back feels really compressed in this posture, then draw your tailbone down and lift the front of your pelvis up. You know, and if not, they don't do it. So giving them kind of permission to really feel the posture in their own body. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and then focusing on what the end feeling should feel like. Like you said, if it means you're feeling compressed, this is going to help you to feel more expansive.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of alignment, so advanced asanas, people working toward that elusive handstand or pincha or something, what would you say to someone just starting down that route, that have seen the fancy photos on Instagram and they want to get there and, you know, maybe they're jumping up too fast or they're not quite ready? What would you say to someone working toward advanced asana?
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like with advanced asana, you do have to be a little bit more alignment based. Like you have to be a little bit more particular to be able to hold the postures and be able to like really nail it. So I am a little bit more strict, I guess, with alignment for like handstands. The way that I learned how to nail a handstand in the middle of the room was I literally carved aside time every single day. Like I was constantly kicking up in the middle of my living room. I was kicking up in the grass. I was kicking up and, you know, I was working the front desk at La Jolla Yoga Center at the time. And I remember the teachers would go in and teach their class and I had a whole hour and I would just sit out in the front of the studio and I would kick up into handstand, kick up into handstand, kick up into handstand. And finally I was like, oh, I'm starting to feel this in my body. You know, it's just like with anything, practice. I love teaching handstand workshop. It's like one of my very favorite workshops to teach. I've done it probably 12 times now. I've taught like 12 handstand workshops in the last 5 years, which is kind of hilarious. Yeah. But it's something that everybody wants to learn. So seeking out, you know, somebody that's skilled at being able to give you instruction. Understanding what's supposed to happen within like the shoulders is important in handstand and being able to find that proper foundation in the palms.
What would you describe so the shoulders, what do you see people maybe doing incorrectly and how could, if they're at home listening and they're like, yeah, I can't get that steady foundation. What do you see wrong? How would you kind of guide someone with their shoulders? To do it correctly?
So it starts with the hands, actually. So for most people, if you take your hands and place them on the ground with the index fingers lining up parallel and forward, so the hands are slightly actually turned out to the left and to the right when your index fingers are pointed forward. And what that does is it allows your upper arm bones to externally rotate. So the armpits are wrapping in towards one another. And what that does is spreads the shoulder blades across the back or protracts them. And when you protract your shoulder blades, you get your serratus anterior, those muscles that are like right alongside the rib cage underneath the armpits to kick in. And those are really strong, important muscles for not only your handstand, but your forearm balance, crow pose, basically all arm balancing. A lot of times what I see is people do the opposite. They squeeze their shoulder blades together or they kind of collapse in the chest or they crunch their shoulders towards their ears for arm balancing. So understanding the wrapping of the arms can be really helpful. And then once you're upside down in handstand, a lot of the weight is distributed between your knuckles and your fingerprints. So you kind of have to find that you're teetering back and forth and finding like these little micro movements. Again, I'm showing her and you guys can't see this, but can't see what I'm doing with my hands right now. Pressing down through your knuckles and pressing down through your fingerprints, it's going to give you this like little bit of like weight distribution within the body. Has a powerful impact like all the way up. And handstands just like Tadasana, which is mountain pose. So if you can find the neutral pelvis, if you can find the core stability, it's the exact same thing as Tadasana, but you're upside down on your hands.
And I think a lot getting over the fear of trying, you know, like you said, just keep doing it. I mean, would you say, what about someone trying to move from the wall to the middle of the room? Because I think that's got to be one of the hardest things. You know, I go up,
totally.
The wall's there, you know you're safe, but how do you take that big step? Like, okay, now I'm going to start doing this in the middle of a park, in the middle of a room.
Yeah.
In the middle of a yoga room.
Right. I actually usually never teach kicking up towards the wall because it usually forces people into banana back or back bend. So what I do is I have people turn around and put their heels by the wall and start almost in like a down dog position with their hands away from the wall. So your butt would be facing the wall. And then step 1 foot up the wall, walk your hands back. And you can actually like so you can step both feet up the wall and walk your hands in as close as you can. That creates more strength and stability in the shoulders versus the kicking up and trying to find the wall. So you're building strength within the correct posture of the shoulders already and it's a lot easier to find the neutral pelvis and the core stability with that as well.
So get really comfortable there. Okay, now once you're comfortable there, you have that wall, but okay, now you can hold it for a while. You've been training. Okay, then maybe start grass, maybe start soft.
And then when you can get into the middle of the room too, especially if you're somebody that ends up kicking up and over, there's a little trick of putting a towel or a strap in one of your hip creases, the front of the hip crease, so that when you go to kick up, your kicking leg is straight. And the leg with the towel in it it forces the hip flexor to kick in. So rather than getting you to the point where you're flying over, you're stopping yourself because you're using that hip flexor.
Ooh.
It's kind of hard to explain. But,
we might need you to demonstrate.
We might need a demo for that one.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, I'll definitely be offering workshops, the handstand workshop again in 2019. So I haven't picked my dates yet, but I think I'm doing one in January. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned if you're in San Diego. Yes. Yeah. Reiki. So you're Reiki certified, yeah?
I'm a Reiki level 2 practitioner.
Yeah, so for someone who has maybe heard the Reiki word thrown around, they haven't done a Reiki session or haven't been in a yoga class with a Reiki teacher, I'd like you to just maybe explain what Reiki is and what they'd expect from it.
Okay. So Reiki, as we know, everything around us is made out of energy, right? That's proven. That's science. And when you become a Reiki practitioner, during level 1, you go through a Reiki attunement. So your chakras are basically opened up by your Reiki master. And then she seals them open, or mine was a she. So she does this whole attunement that's kind of secretive. We don't see it because your eyes are closed when you get it done. But you basically have your chakras sealed open, and you go through a 21-day chakra cleanse. And you go through some stuff comes up during those 21 days. Yeah. And so basically you're clearing your chakras so that you're this really clear channel for being able to give Reiki to others. So when you become a Reiki practitioner, so Reiki level 1 is for yourself. So you learn how to do Reiki on yourself. And then when you go back, you get another attunement. And again, they open your chakras, they seal them, and you go through another 21-day cleanse. So it's an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Some stuff comes up during that time.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
But with level 2, you're able to give Reiki to others. And really, you're just a conduit. You're a channel for universal energy. And depending on who you go to, this Reiki practice can look different. Some people practice only hovering the hands over the body. So there's different hand positions and different locations of the body. So you might be hovering the hands right above the head over the different chakras. I like hands-on, especially for people that have never done it before. Hands-on is a little bit, I find to be a little bit more powerful because they can actually maybe feel what some people can feel the energy. The purpose of it is really to help you to get into this like deep state of relaxation. It also can help you to clear any unwanted energy that you've maybe been holding on to. I usually start each session with I use a pendulum and I test the chakras to see how they're spinning or how they're aligned. And you can kind of see where the imbalances might be within the body. And then you usually start from head to toe unless there's a specific area that you really want to be focusing on, concentrating on, but just trying to help the chakras to be aligned and spinning freely in a healthy manner.
And speaking of chakras, if someone is listening that doesn't know about chakras, maybe they've heard a teacher bring it up in a class or they've started learning. Do you want to just give a brief overview of chakras?
Yeah, so there's said to be 7 main chakras within the body. There's actually more than that, but the 7 chakras are usually what you hear of. Some traditions talk about an 8th chakra that's above the crown. So we've got the crown chakra, you've got your third eye, throat chakra, heart chakra, solar plexus, sacral, and root. And each of the chakras is aligned with different organs within the body. Each chakra is aligned with different colors, different elements. Like the ones at the base are going to be a little bit more like earth. And then as you rise up, we've got fire, water, air, ethereal. You know, they kind of go up as you rise. And you know, depending on if you had like a really solid, safe childhood, you might have like a really strong root chakra. If you had like a really unstable childhood, some people have imbalances in their root chakra, you know, and it kind of just depends on how, you know, they've developed along the way. You develop the lower ones first, and then they kind of, so meditation and connection to spirit, those are going to be your higher chakras. And more of the concepts that are harder to explain.
Moving into the spiritual realm, out of the body, out of the physical, into the, so how I've understood it. You're moving higher into spirituality and out.
Yeah.
And so Reiki can help to kind of look at those centers and see what might be out of balance. And then you're using, you know, infusing your teaching and what you know into helping them to get balanced.
Exactly.
And to understand this is what is out of balance. And so now, not only can we do this in the session, but maybe learning more about yourself on your path to healing. Because as we know, yoga, meditation is just one tool in this holistic approach to living a healthy life. So having a better lens on, I didn't even realize that I was blocked in my heart chakra and there was all this gunk going on in there. So being able to have someone else kind of even come in and show that to you so that it's something, okay, this is something, because it's the idea that, okay, we're going to get this balance now, it's going to be balanced forever.
Right.
Yeah. We're always kind of getting in.
Well, and I can test my chakras one day and the next day it'll be totally different. It just depends on what's happening in your life at that time. One of my favorite parts about Reiki is that every single person has an extremely different experience when it comes to their sessions. Some people don't really feel anything during it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not working. They just aren't maybe feeling anything. Some people get like big twitches or like physical releases. I'm one, when I get Reiki done on me, I'm like twitching like crazy, like almost like body convulsions. Yeah. So it's interesting. Wow. I've gotten Reiki after like, you know, a breakup and been really upset and just like release of crying, you know. Yeah. Some people get, I've had it before where I've just like hysterically started laughing for no reason. So there's all these different ways that you can release unwanted energy or stuck energy. And it might not even be associated with anything. Like it's just like your body's just releasing. So it's kind of neat. Some people get really vivid color experiences while they're doing it, or they get visualizations. When I got my Reiki attunement, I had this like beautiful visualization of like a giant amethyst crystal. And so that's always been like something I've been drawn to. Yeah. I like to give Reiki during my yoga classes. I generally Reiki the room before everybody comes in. And then I Reiki during Shavasana, typically. Some people get like hands-on Reiki during Shavasana. I'd give Reiki during my private client sessions. So yeah, I'm kind of giving a combination of private yoga and Reiki most of the time. But then I also do one-on-one hour-long Reiki sessions where you're laying fully clothed on a massage table and it's just light hands-on practice.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you could get introduced to it, whether it's a teacher who has their Reiki certification teaching a class. I think a lot of times it'll be on the schedule. So if you're interested in wanting to see what is this like, I know looking at your yoga studio even, or for the teachers in your part of town that have the certification doing, if there's something really specific, you want a more personalized approach, doing a one-on-one session. Yeah, a lot of different ways to get exposed to it.
And my Reiki master is actually here in San Diego, Kelly Martin, her business partner, Christy Kuttner, they do yin and Reiki trainings all the time. Like they're constantly leading Reiki trainings. So it's becoming a lot more, I think there's a lot more people interested in it now, which I think is really neat. And even if you don't want to become a Reiki healer, like it's such a beautiful practice to learn on your own. Like anybody can do Reiki. It's just a matter of like tuning in. Like sometimes just putting your hand on your heart or hand on your belly when you don't feel good. Like we kind of intuitively do it for ourselves anyway. You know, when you don't feel good, you put your hand on your stomach or your hand on your head. Like you're basically giving yourself Reiki without kind of knowing it. So it's just like another way to like fine tune it and kind of understand how powerful we are. Like we are all made up of energy. We can all transfer energy. And there's actually studies now that they say that you can physically transfer energy from one person to another now, which I think is mind-blowing. Yeah. And we've all kind of known that.
Yeah.
And the practice of Reiki too, because sometimes people get like freaked out. They're like, I don't want somebody touching me and giving me energy.
Yeah.
With Reiki, it's when you become a practitioner, you understand you're not giving your own energy to the clients. You are channeling universal energy. And so it's really important to ground yourself first and protect your own energy as a healer. There's like a meditation you can do in the morning or meditation right before you give Reiki so that you're not like giving away your energy.
Yeah, I think that's an important point for Reiki, for yoga teachers, protecting our own, and, you know, realizing this is a point where I'm a channel and it's not necessarily that personal energy leaking out or finding ways. What are other methods that, you know, healers can kind of protect their energy? And, you know, would you recommend Palo Santo, sage, any of that?
Yeah, I love burning Palo Santo and sage. I think a lot of it is intention too. Like setting the intention that, you know, it's not about you. It's about being a clear channel. And I think it's really important to check yourself before you go into a space where you're supposed to be offering yoga or meditation or Reiki to others, that it's not about you, and to leave whatever you have going on in your life at the door. Because we can transfer our negative energy and our bullshit too, right?
Yeah.
Can I say bullshit on here?
Sure. Why not?
I said it twice.
Yep.
You know, I mean, and your students can feel that. Like if you're coming in a bad mood and you're coming in with like all your stuff you've got going on in your life, just like a quick meditation, even if like you're in the car. Like I've had plenty of days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just had the craziest morning. Like I'm stressed out, I'm anxious, and I just have to sit there for a minute and go, nope, leave it here. This isn't the time for it. This is like your students are expecting you to be a clear channel, a safe place for them to come and experience whatever they want to experience without you infusing your energy into it. So it's really, really important to continuously check yourself as a teacher and be making sure that what energy you're giving off. Yeah. That makes sense.
Turning it around, making it about the students. So you also host international yoga retreats. I'd love to, you know, from your experience, tell us a little bit about like what, you know, how long you've been hosting them and maybe what you've seen as inspiration and things that have gone on in those retreats, or what's brought people there, what you've even noticed kind of as an aha moment teaching those over the years.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to be able to lead yoga retreats. It's brought me to some amazing places. It's such a unique and different way to travel, I think. You know, typically when we're traveling, we're going on vacation with like only our close friends or family and people that we know. And this is a way to kind of get out of your comfort zone and travel with people that you maybe wouldn't necessarily travel with. But also people that are pretty like-minded, I'd say. That everybody that kind of goes on a yoga retreat, for the most part, is interested in similar, at least interested in growth and interested in kind of connecting with themselves on a deeper level. Our first yoga retreat that we actually did was this past February. We went to Guatemala and had 33 people join us on the retreat, which was equal part amazing and equal part a lot of energy to give out. But, you know, my business partner Nina and I do the retreats together. And so it's, you know, obviously a little bit easier to be able to divide up your time and your energy with that many people. But what I found was that we had people coming from like all walks of life. Different ages. So Nina lives on the East Coast. She lives in Cape Cod. So she had a lot of her friends and students from the Boston area and Cape Cod area. And then Nina and I we met at a yoga studio out here in San Diego. We actually met at Buddha Yoga. And so we both have clients out here, and a lot of people came from my San Diego client base, but then we'd have some random people that joined us. They found us on the internet, and they, within the last 2 weeks before the retreat, we had 5 completely random signups that signed up on their own without knowing anyone. And honestly, I think that those people have now made these like lifelong friends, and they all want to travel together again. They all just like instantly fell in love with each other, which I think is just so cool. To have orchestrated something that has brought, new friends together, and you get to learn about people that you wouldn't necessarily get to know in another way. And you're experiencing these amazing cultures and going on adventures in these beautiful landscapes. And Lake Atitlan in Guatemala is, it's set on an energy vortex center. So kind of like how Machu Picchu is. And so there's just this like undescribable, powerful energy at the lake. And a lot of people had like breakthroughs and transformations. I know myself included. I came back from the retreat and ended a 4-year relationship. Like I just had like major life shifts. I wasn't even planning on that, but I feel like there's just some magical energy at that lake that kind of really gets you to become in tune with yourself. And we always do a component on our retreats of kind of like a visioning and goal setting of like, okay, let's take stock in where we're at right now, especially the one in January, just because it's kind of a good time of the year to check in with yourself and see how your last year went and where you want this year to go, and what your vision for your life is, and is what I'm doing right now in alignment with where I want to be, or do I need to like shift track and try to, just a good way to get perspective on, a week away from your normal life and be able to get kind of perspective and grounding and where you want your life to go. We just did a retreat in Costa Rica in November last month. I was like, wait, that was like 3 weeks ago. That retreat was a little bit more intimate. There was 9 people on that one, which was also equally as amazing because we got to really, really know our participants, and they had an intimate experience with each other, which was really neat. We're headed back to Guatemala again in January because we fell in love with it so much, and then we're going to go to Tulum, Mexico in March of next year, of 2019.
Very exciting. So some opportunities for travel, yoga, meditation, if people are interested. And stay tuned after the episode. I have a promo code, or actually Vintantra100 is the promo code. So you can get $100 off any retreats that Jenna and Nina are doing next year. And I'll be sure to add that in the show notes for the episode on the blog. Very excited to offer that because I think it's such a great opportunity. I've been on yoga retreats and hosted them as well, and demystifying, like, it's a great opportunity. You could go by yourself, you could go with a friend, you could go with your partner, and you're getting your yoga in, you're getting your meditation in, but also doing these other fun things. You're eating well, you're traveling, you're adventuring, you're getting out of your comfort zone. So thank you for sharing some of those, demystifying a little bit. And, I think a lot of yoga teachers see other people hosting these and maybe want to host them themselves. What would be your advice to someone who's maybe considering hosting their first yoga retreats? And are there any learnings you've had in the past from retreats you've led that you'd like to pass along?
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience for us. I originally had the idea to host a retreat maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I wanted to do one up in Lake Tahoe. My best friend lives up there, and we had always had this vision of leading yoga retreats together. But when it came down to it, I was like, I got overwhelmed with the planning. I was like, we've got to rent a house, and we've got to get a chef, and we've got to get a van, and we've got to figure out how to get people to and from the airport, and all the little details. And what I've discovered in the planning of the retreats is that I don't want to deal with any of those details, which some people really love, especially my Virgo friends, or they like love to be super organized, and like that's like what drives them. It's not what drives me. I like to really focus my attention and energy in the actual retreat participants, and I like to be able to be like fully present with them once I'm there. So we did our first retreat through a company called Soul Seed. And it's actually our friends, Kristen and Ian. They started this retreat company a few years ago, and it's like been really successful for them. They take all the stress out of the planning. So especially a place like Guatemala, like I would have never been able to figure out how to get everybody from the airport to Antigua, and then from Antigua to the lake. I mean, you've got to take a bus to the lake, and then we get on these little boats, these lanchas that take you around the lake. But you have to know how to contact, you've got to have some insider information to be able to figure that stuff out. And especially going to a place like Guatemala, it's not some place that you would normally travel to on your own. A lot of people don't travel there on their own, so it's nice to have like a retreat coordinator for that. Nina and I did branch off and do Costa Rica on our own, and we're doing Tulum on our own. And I made sure that I picked retreat centers that do a lot of that behind the scenes work for you. So the meals are all taken care of. They arrange transportation to and from the airport. They have specific excursions that you can choose. And so we really were able to plan directly with the retreat center. So for me, that's super important. Just kind of take some of the stress off of the planning. And I think making sure that you have a solid client base first too. It's rare that somebody can actually take the time off during the week that you want. Plus you have to have a lot of students in your classes, or a lot of exposure to a big group of people to be able to have people that can go on your retreat, So that was a learning process too. It's like, I tried to do one in Italy a few years ago, and it was like, it totally flopped, like we got like 3 signups and we were like, we have to cancel it. But that's part of the reality, It's like, it looks all glamorous, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think when the timing is right, things kind of fall into place. And the timing was obviously right for our last 2 retreats. And it's important to pick somebody that you can work well with. Like Nina and I work so well together, and we have a really unique business partnership that I don't think a lot of people have. And we like really realize how rare it is. We complement each other in like all these different ways. We're different teachers, but we also have like similar values and background, not background, but similar values and understanding of like the practice, I think. And I think that's a really important factor too, finding somebody that you not only can work well with, but that you want to travel with. Yes, there's a lot that goes into it, Yeah. And I'm sure you can speak to that too, of having to figure out like who you'd want to do the retreats with, and finding that balance of like how to share the responsibilities and not feel like one person's doing all the work, or
Yeah, and I think discussing that stuff on the front end, like this is a business trip. It's as much as it's going to be fun and it's going to be enjoyable, you're looking forward to it, like you're working. This
totally
is, as a yoga teacher, this is business. So finding that person who has similar business perspective and isn't afraid to talk about it in advance, I think. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this too, like the marketing of what you're doing as a yoga teacher. I think even just hearing the word marketing or the business of yoga teaching, it can feel very daunting. I'm very lucky that my background is in marketing. So to me, that's the part that came easy. And now it's, okay, how do I layer in the yoga side? But to teachers that are maybe wary of the marketing piece and the talking about what they're doing, what would you say to them? And,
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than feeling like you have to like be selling as a yoga teacher, But I mean, this is my business at this point. It's like, this is what I do full time. And we're offering an amazing product. And so just being confident that you're not like trying to sell anything bad, like you're selling something that people really enjoy and they're going to benefit out of. So it's not like, don't be afraid to talk about what you're doing and being proud of what you're doing. Because I think a lot of people don't understand it too. Nina and I have talked about this, where sometimes our family members, not necessarily, they're like, what do you do? You're teaching yoga full time? You're literally going on vacation for your job, And it's like, not being ashamed of like, this is what I'm doing full time. Like, it is a lot of work that I'm putting in. Our yoga retreat planning started a year ago for this Guatemala retreat that we're doing in January. We like started planning it right when we got back from Guatemala last year. So although it seems like I'm getting paid to go on a week vacation with people in paradise, it's like, no, I've been planning this for an entire year. There's a lot of behind the scenes work. And, I mean, with any job, you shouldn't feel bad about getting compensated for the work that you're putting in. You're putting together a pretty cool experience, Yeah.
And you're working while you're there. So not
Oh,
only the
totally.
work before, but you're showing up. You might have, a little time before, after, but you're preparing and holding that space for all of those people coming on the journey. And you don't really get to turn off while you're there. So not being afraid to share that, knowing genuinely, and this is something I'm providing value to. So talking about it in a genuine way and knowing there are people, the right people will find you and will hear about it and will recognize the value of what you're providing.
Yeah. And Nina and I always have to go back to our why. Like, especially when it feels like you're like, oh, I just don't want to be like selling this retreat. Because that's not our intention, is to like make money. Of course, that's something that we're doing along the way. We're making money doing this, but going back to like, why are we doing this? Like, our why has always been to bring people together. Like, we love community and connection, and allowing people a different way to experience traveling in a transformative way. So being able to really like discover a lot about themselves. And so just going back to like, what's your why? And I think that's the same thing with being a yoga teacher. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, always checking yourself, and really for anything, it doesn't just have to be a yoga teacher. Like, what's your why? What's your purpose in what you're doing? And kind of always coming back to that and remembering that that's what it's about. And if you're solid in your why, people will see that, and then they'll want to, the right people will want to be involved with what you're offering, I guess, whether it be, teaching public yoga classes or private yoga. It's like you're attracting what your intention is, I guess, what you're putting out there.
A couple last questions here. What is a 10-minute tip that anyone at home listening, if you could just give them a 10-minute thing, try this today, I think it's going to make your life so much better, or at least a start. What's something someone could try 10 minutes at home today?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I've found in the last 2 years or so has been my meditation practice. And I know that when people hear meditation, they're like, I can't meditate, my mind's too crazy, and so they just don't do it. And I was the same way for years. I'm a Vata, which is like kind of airy, and I'm like, when I sit down, my mind is going a mile a minute, and I'm like thinking of all these different things, and it's really challenging to sit still. So what I did was I downloaded this app called Insight Timer, and it's been life-changing for me. I used to not be able to get past like 3 days meditating, and with the app, it holds you accountable, so you can keep track. I don't know if you've seen it before, but
I've heard of it. Yeah,
you can keep track of how many days you've meditated. You can use a timer on the app that's really nice. It'll like do a gong at the beginning or a gong at the end, or you can like pick the sound that you want. You can set however much time you want, but then there's also like 10,000 guided meditations. Which I think is a nice way to start. So you can pick, like, I have 5 minutes. I can sit down and do a 5-minute meditation. And there's all these different topics you can pick. I say start small. This yoga practice, like the physical asana practice, was developed so that you can sit still and meditate. So it's a nice thing to add into your routine. Even if you've only got 5 minutes sitting in your car before you've got to go into an event, or how many times are we wasting time just sitting there scrolling on the phone when you could just sit down and turn on this app and sit there for 5 minutes? And it's just like really does reset for the whole day. I recently finished 371 days in a row of meditating, and I literally had not gone past like 3 or 4 days. And then I missed one, and it was like the saddest thing. And now I was like beating myself up over it, but then I'm like, you know what? It's honestly 371 days is like
out of 372,
beyond.
pretty good.
And now I'm at like day 44, I think, and it's just like, oh, I can't believe I missed it. But not beating yourself up over it too, So meditation, I think, is like, for me, the number one thing at this point is like, even if I can't physically get to my yoga mat, I always make sure I start my day with a meditation.
I was going to say, do you pick a specific time of day? Is it the beginning of the day for you? Has that made it easier to really bake into your routine?
Yeah. So I do it first thing. I'm a morning person. I teach class early in the morning. I start at 6:30 with my earliest yoga class, or I start at 7 with my privates. So almost every day of the week. And so I make sure to get up an extra 20 minutes or 30 minutes beforehand to do my meditation. And I'll tell you, the reason where I missed that one day is because after I got to 365 days, I go, you know what? I'm not going to be so rigid with myself. I'm not going to be so strict. And I'll meditate like whenever I feel like it in the day. And that's how I missed it. So for me, consistency is really key, and picking a certain time during the day. And that's not going to work for everyone, of course. Like waking up at 5:20 in the morning to meditate is not like going to be the top priority for everyone. But you can do it during, right before you go to bed, or there's a lot of really cool like yoga nidra meditations on there, or yoga for sleep, or sorry, not yoga, meditation for sleep. Just being consistent, picking a time, setting it, and you can even pencil it into your schedule. There's a lot of apps now that hold you accountable. They'll be like you can like check off, did I read today? Yes. Did I meditate today? Yes. Did I do my yoga practice today? Did I make my bed? It's like if you need that checklist,
crossing things off. I think the consistency, baking, for me too, I first started mine, I did my 300 hour in Ecuador, and we started every day, 6:30 a.m. The first thing on the schedule was meditation, breath work and meditation, or just meditation. And so that was my non-excuse. Like, okay, I could get up every day in my 300 hour training and do this for an hour. I can do it now. I start with 10 minutes, and if it's a day I know I don't have anything going on right away after, I'll maybe do 15, maybe 20. But similar, before that, I was like, when I can do it, and it would be maybe a break in the day when I could take a walk at work or something like that, and then I would do it. I'm like, okay, great, I get a meditation, but then I wasn't consistent. Whereas this, if I'm like, no excuses, the first thing when I get up, I head straight to my meditation pillow, and then I could, carry on with the dishes or anything else I wanted to do for that day. And then I think as a teacher, starting the day with the meditation, you really start from this grounded, clear, connected space.
Totally.
Like we talked about, so that you can then go and hold that space, and you take it away from you. You've done your own practice. You've done the work yourself.
I think it's so important, and like I discussed with the Reiki and making sure that you're protecting your own energy. I just kind of keep that in my morning meditation practice too. Like I'll say to myself, like, my energy is protected, I am grounded. You can visualize yourself with like a golden bubble of energy around you, or a protective energy. Because we're exposed to people all day long, not just yoga teachers, just in general, people at the grocery store, people at in line, people in traffic, and it's like you're constantly like bombarded with other people's energy. So kind of setting the day, starting off protecting yourself first and grounding yourself really does. It's been really powerful for me, and I think it's resonated in my teaching and my private yoga. Showing up already, having dealt with my own stuff.
Not waiting for it to come up later.
Right?
It's like, nope, this has already been sorted through. Okay.
And it's worth it. It's like, how many times do we push snooze in the morning?
Yeah.
I was guilty. I would push snooze like 10 times in the morning, and I'm like, okay, just wake up the first time your alarm goes off, and then you can sit there and meditate for 20 minutes. You're basically doing nothing. You're just sitting there. Yeah. And I'll sit up in my bed. I used to like get off the bed and go do a sit on my meditation cushion, but I'm like, nope, I'm just going to sit up against my pillow. Like, it doesn't have to be anything formal and fancy, like being cozy and comfortable. I'd have my blanket up around me. It's like...
Yeah, just setting the space, setting the time, sticking to that. I think that's a good point, because you see when you're beginning a meditation or you're considering meditation, you think of the peaceful monk sitting in a cave in a perfect lotus position.
That's not how you meditate?
Some days I channel my inner monk, but...
You gotta put on your red robe before you can meditate. Yeah,
and you'll be floating by the end.
Totally.
So I think people have that vision in their head, and if they're not doing it that way, then they can't. Whereas if you just get out of your head of that, like, it's okay to lay down and meditate. It's okay to sit in bed with a cozy blanket around you and meditate. It's more about setting the time aside, just bringing yourself back to that space between and the guided meditations. Your point to that also really helped me. Before going on my 300 hour, I was meeting weekly with a guided meditation teacher.
Oh, cool.
And so she's really helped me understand, okay, this is if I'm even sitting by myself, here are different ways I could get myself to a meditative place. It's not natural to just close your eyes and go right there. No. People need to, I think, meditation is so hard. Yes, it is. That's your point. That's why yoga, we go through the physical first so that we can work our way to that point. So.
Yeah. And there's so many different types of meditation too. I think there's this misconception that you're supposed to sit there and not think.
Yeah.
And so finding the style of meditation that works for you too. There's like mantra meditation where you can be repeating the same mantra over and over and over again. That's like one way to kind of clear your mind. My personal favorite type of meditation is just like mindfulness meditation. And so I'm allowing everything that's there to be there, but trying not to contribute. So just finding the style of meditation that works for you. Like, I mean, I'm still thinking while I'm meditating, but I'm trying not to contribute to it, if that makes sense, you know? So there's this misconception that you have to sit there and be like totally void of thought. And of course that's going to be challenging. Like you're going to set yourself up for failure if you think you're going to sit there for 20 minutes without thinking at all, you know?
It's getting
this
better.
Isn't working, you know? It's like, so... And maybe, you know, I think it's a good point too, trying to find a meditation teacher that can really help you to hone your skills and figure out how to best meditate for yourself.
Yeah, I know that's becoming more popular, you know, having meditation clinics or, you know, studios, even I think LA, New York, probably more likely. Here, I think you're more likely to find maybe a meditation class on the schedule. Yeah. But for me, it was a corporate meditation teacher. So we actually had someone coming into the work.
Cool.
And similar to how you can have a corporate yoga class, we had a corporate meditation class. And it was interesting because I found that there were different groups of people. Like there was a certain group that came every time to the meditation and they were really in the meditation. And there was another group for yoga. Sometimes there would be crossover, but some people found the meditation to be more impactful. And, you know, for them, they found it easier to come to their meditation pillow or to that practice than the yoga class. So maybe if even yoga hasn't been resonating for you, but you want to explore spirituality in your path, and try meditation, try the insight timer, and you might find that's an easier practice for you than the physical part.
Yeah. And I mean, and yoga is an eightfold path. So it's like there is like meditation is one of the branches of yoga, you know, and it's like physical practice is just one tiny little branch. So, you know, even if you're just meditating, that is still practicing yoga, you know. One of the things that I forgot to add about our retreats is that we add an optional meditation every morning. So we do start off the retreat at 7 a.m. And Nina and I are very differing in the way that we present meditation because she loves guided meditations and I can't, like, I usually can't stand them at this point. Like, I just want people to stop talking when I'm doing it. But they have been so helpful for so many people to be able to get a meditation practice going. For me, I'm always like, I just want to be here in my own head. You know what I mean? So I think we do this like really beautiful balance of like, I teach more of a mindfulness meditation to the students and then give them time to like really be in it. And then Nina teaches, she'll go through like different types of meditations throughout the week. And so it's like a really neat way to see that there's different ways to practice meditation and it doesn't always have to look the same, and pick which one works for you. Like she took us through this beautiful, I always want to say this wrong, Tonglen, where you're like taking other people's suffering on and as your own. It's a Buddhist practice where you take in the suffering of the world and then you know, give out light and peace. Wow. So she did that one. We've done a chakra meditation together. There's just like so many different, there's thousands and thousands of ways you can you know, meditate. So just picking something that works for you, I guess.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, final question. So the name of the podcast, Yoga for Balance. I'd love to hear, what does balance look like, feel like for you?
Yeah. Well, definitely meditation has been a huge part of finding balance in my life. I think setting like really clear boundaries for myself too, and only kind of taking on what feels energetically right for me. In the past, and I think this is like true for a lot of new yoga teachers or when you're new to whatever profession you're doing, or especially entrepreneurs, like we can tend to take on so much and think that we have to like constantly be doing, especially as an entrepreneur. Like I'd beat myself up if I wasn't doing something all the time. And so remembering that part of, especially as a yoga teacher, it's like part of the practice is giving yourself downtime to like do nothing sometimes, and like give yourself permission to shut your phone off, shut the computer off, go down to the beach, and know that you don't always have to be like efforting and pushing all the time, you know? And I think in the past I was like, I'm going to teach 20 classes a week. I'm going to not have any time to myself. I got to hustle. I've got to be doing more, you know? And it's easy when you see everybody else around you doing so much that you feel like you constantly need to be doing. But I think I found a nice balance in kind of in that effort and ease, like Like, I'm going to hustle some days and I'm going to chill some days, you know, not thinking that you have to like, I went to a yoga class not too long ago. This teacher, Kelly, down at Sojourn. And she was like, you know, I started off this year in like a high trajectory of just like going straight up and having so much personal growth and growth in my business. And like, I resonated with that too, because I was the same way. We started 2018 and we just like skyrocketed with our yoga retreat. I went on some like really cool trips with some of my private clients. Like, I just had some really big things happen. And then all of a sudden it was like plateau. And sometimes when we get that plateau, it's like, oh my God, like I'm not having this like rapid growth anymore. Which can be kind of scary, but just remembering that you can't always be growing. Like, you can't constantly be growing, and then you have to just sometimes sit back and be like, okay, let me ride the like wave of the success, or let me ride the wave of just like things being chill for a little while, you know? Yeah. And that can be scary, especially when you're trying to start your own business or run your own business. It's like knowing that it's okay to have these like waves of, sometimes things are going to be really successful and sometimes things are going to just be like mundane, you know, and kind of like status quo and not like too much growth. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And
did I just get off subject?
No, there's no off subject. There's no off subject.
So that's how I find balance.
Perfect.
Not always pushing and striving.
Yeah.
Like trying to live in the feminine a little bit more and not always be like masculine, drive, you know?
Yeah, there's a time for both.
Yeah.
And stopping to appreciate how far we've come. Find gratitude for that. Yeah. Remembering.
Yeah.
Is there anything else related to yoga, meditation, spirituality, anything you wish listeners would know?
Just trying to still be consistent with your yoga practice, like, and the same thing goes with yourself as a practitioner, not always like thinking that you have to be doing so much. Like, you don't have to be practicing yoga 7 days a week and going to class every single day. Finding balance within your own practice too. And I think within a yoga class too, not always thinking that you have to be doing everything that the teacher offers, you know, like we can strive so much in our classes to like think that we have to be perfect and like, I have to nail this handstand and I have to be able to do all the arm balances and I have to be able to keep up with the person next to me. And just knowing that this practice is a lifelong practice and wherever you're at, it's going to meet you with what you need, you know, whether you want a strong practice or you want a chill practice or meditation, like this practice is always going to be there for you. And there's always going to be something that's, that you get to discover about yourself through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, to stay with it and find really solid teachers that you resonate with. That's been important for me. You know, pick the teachers that you feel like you, that they encourage you to really discover a lot about yourself, you know, like teachers that are invested in their students and wanting you to feel really good, you know? Yeah. We got a lot of those in San Diego.
We do. We're very lucky.
Pretty spoiled.
Yeah, very lucky. Well, and nowadays you have your institute. You could find yoga in so many places. You could find private. You could find public. You could find yoga in different spaces and online now and through these retreats. So you can identify if you're really resonating. For instance, if someone listening, they can find you, go to a yoga retreat of yours, that there's so much more access today than there was in the past. So.
Oh my gosh, totally. Yeah. I just recently, over the last couple of years, I've been involved with this organization called OG Yoga. And it's this amazing organization here in San Diego, and they bring yoga to marginalized communities that wouldn't be able to access yoga. So prisons, like women's shelters, rehab facilities, burn victims, the Braille Institute. And so like you said, there's so many different ways that you can access yoga. And now we're even bringing yoga to populations that like, you know, I mean, can't afford to come to yoga or actually physically can't leave the place that they're at to go get yoga, you know, or to be able to access it. And just knowing that like it really is for everyone. Like this practice is designed for humans. You know, it's like if you're human, you can practice yoga. It's true. You know, whether you're 2 years old or 85 years old, you know.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. And if people want to find you, where should they go to find you online and see what you're up to?
So my website is www.yoga-with-jenna.com. And you can find me on Instagram at yoga-with-jenna. Facebook as well, I think, is the exact same thing. And then I teach publicly at Booty Yoga in downtown La Jolla, right in the Village. I teach 5 classes a week there. And then I am an ambassador for the Lululemon La Jolla store. So I've been teaching once a month. I teach a free yoga class on Saturdays. It's called First Saturday Yoga. So it'll be the first Saturday of every month.
Free,
so
awesome.
It's free, so it's an awesome way to come find me. I think that pretty much covers it.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you. So great having you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I can't wait to share this conversation with the world, and I'm so humbled and grateful that you're here.
Well, I'm so excited to listen to all your other podcasts too.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this and bringing light into the yoga world and sharing your passion with everyone.
A big thank you to Jenna for joining us on this week of the Yoga for Balance podcast. And thank you for listening. Be the first to know when a new episode is live by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and help us grow by leaving a review while you're there. You can find the show notes from today's episode on our website at vintantra.com. That's vintantra.com. Have an amazing day, and I hope you'll join us again soon.